There's a saying in Sicily that's older than any law written on paper. You can betray your brother, but never betray the code. It's called Omertà, the Sicilian Code of Silence, a law that existed long before the Mafia and survived long after the Mafia stopped being an empire. It's not just a rule, it's a psychology, one that shapes entire generations to never speak, never confess, never trust outsiders. And in today's world of surveillance, social media, and whistleblowers, Omertà may be the last true secret still standing. So what is the Code of Silence? Why did people follow it so religiously that they'd rather die than break it? And how does it still echo through modern societies, from politics to corporate boardrooms? Let's dive deep into the psychology, history, and legacy of the Sicilian Code of Silence, and discover why sometimes silence speaks louder than words. To understand Omertà, we have to go back centuries. Long before the Mafia existed, Sicily was a land ruled by outsiders: Greeks, Arabs, Normans, the French, the Spanish. Every few generations, a new conqueror arrived. Every time, the people learned the same lesson. You don't survive by trusting authority. You survive by protecting your own. So silence became power. Speaking to outsiders, even for justice, meant betrayal. And when the Sicilian Mafia rose in the 19th century, they didn't invent Omertà. They inherited it. They turned a cultural survival instinct into a weapon of control. To them, Omertà wasn't about honor. It was about order. If everyone stayed quiet, no one could betray the system. No cops, no courts, no witnesses. Just the word of men of respect. At its heart, Omertà is a psychological mechanism, a belief that loyalty and fear are two sides of the same coin. To outsiders, it seems insane. Why would anyone protect killers, gangsters, or corrupt bosses? But inside the system, silence equals safety. Breaking Omertà isn't just betrayal, it's erasing your identity. You're no longer Sicilian, no longer family, no longer alive in the eyes of your world. Psychologists who studied mafia informants say the guilt they feel after talking to the police isn't always moral, it's existential. One former mafioso told investigators, "When I spoke to the police, I felt like my soul was dissolving." That's the power of the code. It's not written on paper. It's carved into the conscience. The purest test of Omertà came in the 20th century, during Italy's war against organized crime. Judges like Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino risked their lives to expose the mafia's networks. They launched the Maxi trial in 1986, the largest criminal prosecution in history. Hundreds of mobsters were charged, but none of it would have been possible without one man, Tommaso Buscetta, the first high-ranking mafia boss to break Omertà. When he testified, his words shook the foundations of Italian society. He described the mafia as a state within a state. He exposed how the bosses ruled through fear and silence. And yet, when asked if he regretted breaking the code, he said, "I didn't betray the mafia. The mafia betrayed itself." For Buscetta, Omertà had stopped protecting the people. It only protected power. That's when the myth cracked. For the first time, silence wasn't sacred. Truth became the rebellion. But why was silence so hard to break? Because Omertà didn't rely on rules. It relied on fear psychology. In Sicily, punishment didn't need to be public. You didn't need to see a man killed to know what would happen if you spoke. You'd see his shop burned down, his family shunned, his grave left unmarked. The message was clear. The law won't protect you. Your silence is your only shield. This fear created what sociologists call a culture of complicity. When everyone knows the truth, but no one dares to say it, the silence becomes a form of social glue. Even today, surveys in southern Italy show that more than 50% of people would refuse to testify against a mafia suspect, not because they approve, but because Omertà still lives in the collective subconscious. But here's the twist. Omertà didn't stay in Sicily. When immigrants moved to America, they brought the code with them. It shaped the American mafia's entire structure. New York's 5 families built their empire on the same foundation. No talking, no witnesses, no names. You see nothing, you hear nothing, you say nothing. That's why for decades, the FBI couldn't infiltrate the mob. Every informant who talked ended up dead. Even inside prison walls, Omertà reigned supreme. But look closer, and you'll see the same psychology alive far beyond organized crime. In corporations that hide scandals, in police departments that protect their own, in governments where loyalty means silence. Omertà isn't just a mafia rule. It's human nature distilled into discipline. In the 1990s and 2000s, a new generation of Italians began to rebel against silence. Grassroots movements, journalists, and families of victims stood up to say the forbidden words. We know who did this. The code began to crack, not because of police, but because of people willing to defy fear. Today, Italian schools teach about the mafia's history. Murals of Falcone and Borsellino stand where bombings once killed them. And yet, the deeper legacy of Omertà survives, not in bullets, but in silence itself. It exists whenever people look away, whenever truth becomes inconvenient, whenever speaking up costs too much. There's one more layer most outsiders miss. To many old Sicilians, Omertà isn't about fear. It's about honor. Honor in handling your own problems. Honor in not begging for justice from strangers. Honor in being self-reliant, even in tragedy. In that sense, Omertà reflects something deeply human, a yearning to be in control when the world feels lawless. It's why the code survived colonization, fascism, and globalization. Because it's not just about crime, it's about identity. But identity comes with a cost. When silence becomes sacred, truth becomes forbidden. And when truth is forbidden, justice dies quietly. Omertà protected families. It also protected murderers. It gave order to chaos. It also turned entire towns into prisons of fear. That's the paradox of the code. It preserved community by destroying conscience. So what can we learn from a centuries-old Sicilian Code of Silence in 2025? That the human mind still struggles between loyalty and morality, between protecting our tribe and doing what's right. Omertà reminds us that silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's surrender. And in a world that rewards secrecy, from politics to social media algorithms, the real courage isn't keeping the code, it's breaking it. Because the moment you choose truth over silence, you've already broken the oldest rule in the book. If you found this exploration eye-opening, subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of power, loyalty, and human behavior. Because sometimes understanding the darkness is the only way to see the light.